A recipe goes missing. A man ends up dead. Nero Wolfe smells foul play. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I'm your host, Harrington. Let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from? Hearing from you makes each mystery better. Here we go. You don't expect trouble to show up wrapped in white linen, carried in a wicker basket with the confidence of a bribe. But that's exactly how it started. 11:42 a.m. on a Monday, with the October sun slanting through the front windows and Fritz in the kitchen humming to himself like the ravioli were a Mozart symphony. I was at my desk, doing something that might have looked like paperwork to the casual observer, but was actually a crossword puzzle I'd salvaged from yesterday's Gazette. Nero Wolfe was in his chair, of course, immersed in the journal of mycology, and ignoring the rest of humanity with that heroic discipline he saves for everyone but Fritz and orchids. The doorbell rang once, a crisp ding-dong like it had good manners. I didn't move. I was on 16 across. A mild Italian cheese. 5 letters. Ricotta fit, but I wasn't sold. The bell rang again. I sighed, capped my pen, and went to the door. The man standing on the stoop was late 40s, lean in the face but padded in the middle like his money had gone to restaurants instead of tailors. His suit was Italian, real Italian, not the made in Italy, kind, stitched in jersey. He had a basket on his arm, lined with a checkered cloth, and a look that said he was too used to being listened to. "Archie Goodwin?" he asked. "That's right." "I have an appointment with Mr. Wolfe." "No, you don't." He blinked, recalculating. "Then consider this a spontaneous gesture of culinary diplomacy. Are you selling something or confessing to something?" That got a twitch of a smile. He lifted the basket an inch. "I brought lunch." I narrowed my eyes. Fritz doesn't take kindly to competition, but I knew Wolfe wouldn't turn down a mystery wrapped in starch and butter. I stepped aside and let him in. "You're interrupting a delicate moment between Mr. Wolfe and a rare fungus, so mind your tone and try not to smell like ambition." He followed me in, polite enough not to rubberneck, and stopped dead at the office threshold. You'd think the sight of Wolfe, seated, wide, unmoving with his hands tented and gaze halfway between dismissive and lethal, would get old. But it never does. Wolfe didn't look up. "Archie, who is this?" Name not yet offered. He brought ravioli, though. That got a response. Wolfe's head rose a centimeter. "Put it on the desk." The man stepped forward and did just that. "I'm Enzo Bellini. I own Bellini's in Midtown." I raised an eyebrow. Bellini's was the place for senators to pretend they were still men of the people, and for TV chefs to prove they could sit without talking. Fritz respected their duck ragout, which was high praise from a man who once called a Michelin-starred chef a nervous butcher. "I'm acquainted with your establishment," Wolfe said. "You've wasted your time if you came for an endorsement." Bellini smiled. "Number Omai came for protection." Wolfe's brow lifted. "Protection? My restaurant's been compromised. A recipe was stolen, but it's not just about ingredients, it's about reputation. There's something in one of our dishes that doesn't belong there. A secret stuffed into the ravioli, so to speak." I looked at him sideways. "You're telling us someone hid a clue in your pasta?" "I'm telling you," Bellini said carefully. "Someone is using my restaurant for something illegal. Smuggling, blackmail, I don't know. But it's happening right under my nose. And last night, one of my cooks quit in the middle of service and left behind a note that said, 'I can't be part of this.'" Wolfe exhaled through his nose. "Phooey, go to the police." Bellini shook his head. "If I go to the police, my name becomes mud before anything is proven. I came to you because this isn't just about crime, it's about containment. I need discretion, and I need someone who can outthink a saboteur." That was the right line. Wolfe hates being flattered, but he hates being underestimated more. He shifted slightly in his chair, which was his version of pacing the room. "What precisely was stolen?" "We make a porcini ravioli." House recipe. My mother's, actually. 3 weeks ago, another restaurant, one of those soulless fusion places, started serving something suspiciously similar. Too similar. I didn't think much of it until last Thursday. That's when I found one of my junior sous chefs rooting through a locked cabinet. He said he was looking for olive oil. That cabinet doesn't hold oil. Does it hold anything of value? Wolfe asked. Bellini hesitated. Not in the obvious sense. Just family recipes, notes, wine ledgers, old photographs. Photographs? Wolfe echoed, narrowing his eyes. I stepped in. You think one of those recipes or photos had more than calories in it? Something worth stealing? Bellini set his jaw. I don't know, but 2 nights ago, one of my servers, Lena, was in tears. Said she saw someone from her past sitting at table 9 and nearly fainted. When I pressed her, she just said, "It's bigger than food, Enzo. I can't explain it." She didn't come in the next day. Have you contacted her? Wolfe asked. She won't respond. She's gone. Vanished. Wolfe leaned back. That's how you knew he was interested. By pretending he wasn't. You are vague, Mr. Bellini. Yet your trouble has a texture I recognize. You'll take the case? I haven't said that, Archie. Open the basket. I did. It smelled like home, war, and lies. The ravioli were plump, golden, dusted with cheese and defiance. Wolfe stared at them. Is this the original recipe? It is, Bellini said. Unchanged, or so I hope. I will consider it. Leave your number with Mr. Goodwin and leave the basket. Bellini nodded, scribbled his contact info on the back of a receipt, and let himself out. Wolfe gazed at the ravioli. Fritz. Fritz appeared silently, like a well-fed ghost. Have the kitchen prepared to analyze this? Certainly, sir. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, visit Bellini's. Speak to the staff. Begin with this Lena. And if she's really vanished, then the ravioli are not the only thing hiding something. And just like that, lunch became a prelude to strategy, suspicion, and the possibility that somewhere in Manhattan, someone was stuffing more than mushrooms into dough. I picked up my coat. When Wolfe takes a case without saying so, it's like watching a bear open one eye. Slow, inevitable, and bad news for whoever thought they'd get away with it. And me? I was about to find out how dangerous a recipe could get. Bellini's didn't believe in signs. The restaurant name wasn't printed on the awning, just stitched into the bottom hem like a discreet signature. If you didn't already know it was there, you probably weren't welcome. That kind of marketing only works in Manhattan, where mystery sells better than menus and the illusion of exclusivity buys you 3 months' wait for a table and the privilege of overpaying for duck. It was 1:26 when I walked in, after the lunch rush, which suited my purposes. The hostess had the lean, weary elegance of someone trained to smile through power plays and anniversary proposals. She sized me up with a flick of mascara-heavy lashes and decided I wasn't a food critic. I let her wonder what I was. Good afternoon. Do you have a reservation? She asked. I've got something better. Curiosity. I flashed the grin I usually reserve for doormen and department store clerks. I'm here to speak with Enzo Bellini. He'll want to make time. Her polite smile didn't twitch. Mr. Bellini is in the back. Then point me in that direction. I'll do the walking. She hesitated just long enough to be professional about it, then gestured discreetly to a hallway lined with glass-walled wine racks. I thanked her and took the detour at a leisurely pace, noting the decor. Minimalist, with moody lighting, enough olive tree wood to keep a carpenter busy for a year, and not a single framed award. Either Bellini was modest or confident. My money was on the latter. He was in a side office, pacing between a small desk and a window that gave a picturesque view of a wall. The moment he saw me, he dropped into a chair and waved me in like a man already mid-confession. I didn't think you'd come so quickly, he said. I'm known for my speed and charm. You get one for free, the other's on Wolfe's invoice. He cracked a tight smile. Have you tried the ravioli? Fritz has. He's probably taste testing them for arsenic and originality as we speak. Bellini leaned forward. Then let's not waste time. Lena, the server I mentioned, she's been with me almost 2 years. Reliable, a little shy. She used to be a pastry assistant before she moved front of house. 3 nights ago, after service, she stayed behind to help fold linens. Said she needed the quiet. An hour later, she was gone. No clock out, no goodbye. Just vanished. Do you know where she lives? A small apartment in Astoria. I sent someone to knock. No answer. You send a manager? I sent Giada. She's our floor captain. Discreet. They were friends. Were. She hasn't heard from Lena either. I made a note in my book, flipping the pencil like I was a conductor between movements. You said Lena mentioned someone from her past. Anyone get a look at him? Giada might have, but I didn't think to press her at the time. You'll think to now. I'll get her. He picked up the phone and dialed. A minute later, Giada arrived, a woman in her early 30s with dark curls pulled tight and eyes that had already survived more nonsense than they deserved. She stood in the doorway like she didn't want to commit to the room. Giada, this is Mr. Goodwin. He's assisting. With the ravioli, she asked, arms crossed. With what might have been inside them, I said, or around them, or whispered near them. Mind if I ask a few questions? She stepped in. Lena's missing. You think this has to do with what happened at the restaurant? I think Lena saw someone who shook her hard enough to leave her apron behind. Did you see this mystery guest? Not clearly. He was at table 9 toward the back. She brought him water, then walked straight to the staff locker room and didn't come out. I thought maybe she was sick, but when I went to check, she was gone. Describe him anyway. Age, build, anything. She hesitated. Late 40s, maybe. Clean-shaven, but not polished. He had the look of someone trying not to be noticed. That always gets noticed. What did he order? Just wine. A Barolo. I remember because it was a good year. He didn't eat. Did he ask for Lena? Number, but when she saw him, her hands shook. Bellini interjected. She told me she used to date someone who scared her, years ago. She never said more. I looked at Giada. You've worked here long? 4 years. Notice anything lately? People in places they shouldn't be? Cabinets open when they shouldn't be? She didn't blink. 2 weeks ago, someone rearranged our back spice rack. Sounds petty, I know, but we're precise. The nutmeg was in front of the clove. That doesn't happen by accident. That snagged my attention. Fritz keeps our spice drawer like Wolfe keeps his orchid ledger, religiously alphabetized and holy. If someone tampered with your spices, they were either bored or looking for something small and easy to hide. Did anything go missing? Giada shook her head. Not that I could tell. But Lena kept a notebook. Personal stuff. She'd jot recipes, customer quirks. It was always tucked in her apron pocket. It's not here. Bellini paled a little. I didn't know that. I stood. I'll need her address. And one more thing. Was anyone else fired or hired recently? Giada and Bellini exchanged glances. He answered. 3 weeks ago, our dishwasher quit. No notice. Next day, we hired a temp from an agency. Young guy, quiet, but last week he didn't show up. And no word from the agency. No paperwork either. You don't run a place like this without paperwork. I assumed my manager handled it. Have the manager call the agency. I want a name, a file, a photograph if they've got one. If this kid's ghosted and Lena's ghosted and someone's fiddling with your spice rack, we've got more than stolen recipes to consider. Bellini nodded. What do you think it is? I glanced out the window. Could be blackmail. Could be surveillance. Could be someone testing the temperature before they turn up the heat. I left them stewing and took the subway to Astoria. Lena's apartment was in a building that had once aspired to be charming but settled comfortably into peeling paint and cheap locks. No answer at her unit. I knocked twice more, waited, then circled around and found the rear staircase. Fire escape, laundry vent, open bathroom window. I didn't climb through it. Wolfe wouldn't approve and the NYPD would disapprove even more. Instead, I looked at the mailbox panel. One slot for El Morante. Still full. I scribbled down her full name and took a walk to the corner deli. The guy behind the counter confirmed she used to come in for cigarettes and almond milk. 3 days ago, she stopped. I filed it mentally. She'd packed light, or not at all. That meant fear, not planning. When I got back to the brownstone at 6:30, Wolfe was in the dining room with a napkin tucked into his collar, and Fritz serving him something golden and crisp that I suspected had started the day as ravioli and ended it as something transcendent. He didn't glance up as I walked in. "Did you find her?" "Number, but I found someone else missing. A vanished notebook and a few misplaced spices." Spices. Nutmeg jumped ahead of clove. That got his attention. He looked up, eyes narrowing like he could already see the pattern in the dust. "Spices," he murmured. "A culinary shift. Someone tampering with order for concealment or signal. Possibly both. And a mystery guest at table 9. Gave Lena a scare. No food, just a glass of Barolo." I've got her full name now. Lena Morante. I'll call Saul." "Do so. And Wolfe?" "Yes? I don't think we're dealing with just a stolen recipe. I think someone's using that kitchen to cook up something else entirely." Wolfe nodded once, slowly. "Then let us prepare the fire." The next morning, Wolfe postponed his 9 a.m. orchid session, something that hadn't happened since the day Inspector Kramer showed up with a corpse's shoe in an evidence bag. That told me 2 things. 1, the ravioli had lodged themselves deeper than expected. And 2, the situation was becoming less culinary and more criminal. I'd called Saul Panzer the night before, and by 10:30 a.m., he was seated in the red leather chair across from Wolfe. Legs crossed, fedora balanced on one knee like it might whisper secrets if he held it right. Fritz brought coffee. Black for Saul, with a lemon twist for Wolfe, who insisted the citrus brought clarity to the beans. I stuck with the dregs of mine and let Wolfe do the opening salvo. "Miss Lena Morante," Wolfe said, "disappeared from Bellini's 4 nights ago after encountering a man who triggered a profound reaction. Her residence has been vacated without notice. A second employee, recently hired, has also absconded without trace. I require both located discreetly and efficiently." Saul nodded. "You have full names?" "Lena Morante," I said, handing over a note. "Astoria address, no recent activity, mail piling up. According to Bellini, she's shy, reliable, and used to work. Pastry." "Noted." "And the second?" Saul asked. Wolfe gestured at me, the way a man gestures at a light switch to turn it off. I took the cue. "We're still waiting on a name," I said. "A temp dishwasher who filled in after someone quit. Supposedly from an agency, but there's no paperwork. Bellini's following up." Saul raised an eyebrow. "No paperwork in a Manhattan restaurant?" "Either sloppy or intentional," I said. "I'd bet the latter. The staff's tight-lipped but nervous. I wouldn't be surprised if someone there already knows more than they're saying." Wolfe sipped his coffee. "Begin with Miss Morante. I'm particularly interested in the man she recognized. See if she's gone underground or been driven." Saul pocketed the note, stood, and nodded to both of us. "I'll be in touch." After he left, Wolfe returned to his chair with the slow reverence of a man slipping back into his cathedral. "Archie," he said, "inquire again with Mr. Bellini. I want confirmation regarding the cabinet Lena's former suitor was suspected of searching. What was stored there? What precisely could have drawn such attention? "I'll squeeze it out of him," I said, heading for the phone. I got Bellini on the line and asked about the cabinet. His tone was more guarded than the day before, like he'd had time to rehearse what not to say. "It's an old cabinet in the back office," he said. "Locked, mostly for tradition. We store handwritten recipes from my mother's journals, a few ledgers, private wine notes." "Private how?" "Wines, purchased quietly. Bottles off-market, from families or collectors." "You think someone would go to this much trouble over a wine list?" "Not unless the list was a map." I paused. "A map to what?" "To relationships. Deals." Names Wolfe, overhearing, raised an eyebrow. "You're saying your wine notes include people?" "Some of our clients. They request specific bottles not yet released, or bottles from cellars that were never meant to be resold. We make accommodations." Quietly. I jotted that down. "And Lena had access?" "She was trusted, but she wouldn't have sold us out." "I believe that." "That's admirable. But someone else might have believed otherwise, and that makes her vulnerable." Bellini's silence thickened. "I'll be back later today," I added. "In the meantime, find out the name of that temp dishwasher. If no one in your office knows, call the agency and start rattling cages." I hung up, turned to Wolfe. "Looks like Bellini's got a sideline. Private wine deals that might embarrass a few clients if exposed. Lena probably saw something, or someone thought she did." Wolfe grunted. "Then it follows the missing notebook is not sentimental but critical." I was thinking the same. Wolfe drummed his fingers on the chair's armrest. "Have Saul look for buyers. If someone believed Lena was passing information, there must be a recipient. And me? You will return to the restaurant, interview the rest of the staff." Subtly. "Focus on Giada. Her loyalty masks discomfort. She knows something." By 1 p.m. I was back at Bellini's, this time through the back entrance like one of the help. The prep kitchen was in controlled chaos, stock pots simmering, knives flashing, and the scent of butter and truffle oil in the air, thick enough to spread on toast. Giada found me leaning on a crate of fennel. She looked more tired than yesterday and a lot less interested in hospitality. "Back already?" she asked. "You know how it is," I said. "When Wolfe gets curious, I get drafted." She exhaled. "What now?" "Let's talk about Lena. Off the record." "There is no record." "I want the truth, not a script. You knew her best, hers. Who was she afraid of?" Giada hesitated, then glanced around. We moved into the empty wine alcove. She folded her arms. Lena didn't talk much about her past, but once, over coffee, she told me about a guy who used to follow her after work. Never hurt her, but made it clear he could. Said he had something on her. A secret. Did she say what? Number. But she said if it ever came back, she'd leave the city. Did she mention his name? Only once. Enzo asked, but she just said, "He calls himself Martin now." That froze the air. "Martin?" I repeated. Giada nodded. That's what she said. Martin wasn't a common name. And it wasn't Bellini's style. He didn't attract that kind of sinister pseudonym. But it fit the profile of a man hiding behind aliases and wine glasses. Someone who'd order a bottle, not a meal, and watch from the shadows. I thanked Giada and stepped back into the kitchen, where the staff bustled with the wary rhythm of people aware they were being watched. I spotted a young line cook with a tattoo of basil leaves on his wrist. An herb enthusiast or a culinary romantic. I figured either way, he'd noticed things others missed. I sidled up. "Hey, question. That temp dishwasher who left, what was his name?" The kid frowned. "No one knew. He didn't talk much. Just did his job, wore a cap low. I think someone called him Jay." "Jay?" Could have been a nickname or just the letter. "Notice anything odd about him?" "Yeah. He didn't act like a dishwasher. Too careful. Like he didn't want to break a plate because he might have to explain where he was. I gave him a grin and a folded 5. He nodded like we'd struck a sacred bond. By the time I left, I had a name, or half of one, and a pseudonym. Wolfe didn't like half measures, but he knew how to read between them. Back at the brownstone, Saul had returned. He was waiting in the office with a folder. "Lena's out of the city," he said without preamble. "Checked into a motel in Poughkeepsie 2 days ago under the name Ellen Maury. Used a prepaid card. I tracked it through a gas station camera. It's her." Wolfe's face didn't change, but the pause before he spoke was telling. "Has she contacted anyone?" "Not that I can tell. But she's scared. Keeps the do not disturb sign up. Leaves for 5 minutes, then comes back. Did you speak to her?" "She left before I could approach, but I'm on her trail. And the man? Still tracing." "You said Martin." "That may help." "It will," Wolfe said. "Good work." When Saul left, Wolfe turned to me. "We now have the ghost, the girl, and the grape." "I was hoping you'd say something like that." "There is a pattern here, Archie. Not just of concealment, but orchestration. Someone is staging scenes, placing people, provoking responses. That implies more than theft. It implies rehearsal." I leaned forward. "You think this is a setup?" "I think it is a performance, and we are about to be invited to the final act." I didn't say anything. The silence was enough. Because when Wolfe starts thinking in metaphors, someone's about to be caught trying to write the ending to a story he hasn't finished telling. The next morning began with Wolfe reading a German monograph on fungal symbiosis while I poked through the morning mail, which included 3 envelopes marked urgent, 2 restaurant menus pretending to be offers for legal insurance, and a neatly folded note with no return address. It had been slipped into the mailbox by hand. No stamp, no smudge. I opened it. Wolfe didn't look up. It was short, neatly typed. 1 line. He calls himself Martin. He lied about the wine. I read it twice before handing it silently across the desk. Wolfe set the monograph down and pinched the note between 2 fingers, like it might leave a residue. He said. "That could have come from Lena." "Possibly. Or someone else who wants us to believe it came from Lena." He looked at me over the rims of his glasses. "Precisely. Want me to run it to Saul?" "Number, you'll take it back to Bellini. Observe how it lands. Say nothing unless you must. Watch everything. You think it's a warning? I think it's an audition. Someone is choosing sides." By 11 o'clock, I was walking past the same stoic hostess at Bellini's. She didn't bother with a greeting this time, just gave me the same look she might give a thundercloud forming above the espresso machine. Bellini met me near the rear wine racks, his suit tailored, but his face a little more wrinkled around the mouth than yesterday. "Something new?" he asked. I handed him the note. He read it, jaw tightening just slightly, then looked up with eyes that were trying not to flicker. "Where did you get this?" "It came by post. No return address. No fingerprints either, probably, but Wolfe will check. We were hoping you might have a reaction." "The wine," he murmured. "Of course." "What wine?" "I told you, some of the bottles we procure are private. Off the books. Discreet. There was one about 6 weeks ago, a rare Piedmontese vintage. Only 6 bottles ever sold. I got one through a collector. Cash deal. Anonymous delivery. And I opened it the night Lena disappeared. Let me guess. It didn't taste right." He nodded. "It was off. The label matched, but the flavor was wrong. And the cork had been resealed. I sent the remains to a lab. No reply yet. Could you have been delivered a fake? Maybe. But here's the thing. The cork wasn't just resealed. It had a thread of paper coiled inside. I didn't tell anyone. Except me. Just now. He rubbed his temple. It said, "Chi trova questo, trova troppo." I translated aloud. "He who finds this, finds too much." He nodded. That night, Lena vanished. I took a moment to process. So someone's using the wine, rare wine, as a vessel. Smuggling notes, information, possibly blackmail material. He looked grim. Or warnings. "Where's the bottle?" "Gone. I disposed of it. I didn't want trouble." Too late. Bellini exhaled. "What do I do?" "You keep pouring wine and pretending nothing's wrong. Meanwhile, I'm going to need your full list of clients who received that vintage." He hesitated. "That's privileged." I leaned in. "Someone's using your restaurant as a mail slot, Mr. Bellini. The sooner we find out who, the less likely you are to be called a co-conspirator in a federal indictment." That landed. He gave me a slow nod. "I'll get the list." While I waited, I circled the dining room. The lunch setup was underway. A different waiter today, a younger guy with a cleft chin and a habit of smoothing his apron every time he walked past a mirror. I flagged him. "Question for you. The night Lena left, you working?" "Yeah," he said. "Table 9. See the man she saw?" He nodded. Didn't like his eyes. Too still, like he was cataloguing everyone. "Did he leave anything behind?" He thought about it. "A paper napkin, folded like a triangle. I cleared it." "Trash?" "Dish bin, probably." "Ever see him again?" "Nope." I slipped him a card. "Call me if you do." Bellini returned with a typed sheet. A list of names, a handful of them familiar to anyone who ever flipped through the society pages. One caught my eye. "Gareth Leach," I said aloud. "He's been accused of laundering funds through artwork." "He swears he's clean," Bellini said. "Drinks Barolo like it's tap water." I pointed to another. "Cecilia Brandt, heiress to a telecom empire. Famous for disowning her siblings and marrying her PR agent." Bellini shrugged. "People like to drink where their secrets feel welcome." I folded the list and tucked it into my pocket. We'll see how welcome they feel when we knock. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the plant rooms, which meant I had 15 minutes to myself. I spent them calling Saul. He answered on the first ring. "She's still in Poughkeepsie," he said. "But she left her room for half an hour this morning. Bought a burner phone." "Think she used it yet?" "Number, but I scanned the motel's outgoing records. One call from her room last night. Short, 10 seconds. Number." I traced it. "It belongs to Giada." That was enough to turn a breadcrumb into a trail. "She's talking to someone," I said. "But not us." When Wolfe emerged, I filled him in. He listened, hands steepled, eyes half-lidded like a man filtering sound through a sieve made of logic. He waited for me to finish, then spoke quietly. "Giada is a hinge." "A hinge?" "She connects Lena, the kitchen, the wine, and the leak. She remains in place while others vanish. That suggests purpose. Possibly manipulation. You think she's behind it?" "Number, but I think someone is using her to observe or to transmit. A fixed point in a fluid system. Valuable." "What next?" Wolfe closed his eyes. "Call Mr. Bellini. Ask him to retrieve Giada's employment file. Photocopy her references, in particular her previous place of work." I did. Bellini, still jumpy, said he'd handle it. An hour later, a fax came through the office machine. Wolfe let me feed it to him like parchment to a prophet. Giada's last employer was a bistro in Brooklyn Heights, La Castagna. She worked there under the name Giada Marini for 9 months before moving to Bellini's. I pulled the name into the NYPD employee verification system. Nothing. No arrests, no incidents, but a check on La Castagna turned something up. 3 years ago, it had a quiet investigation by the ATF for illegal liquor importation. Charges were never filed. But one name in the case notes matched the list Bellini had given me. Gareth Leach. I brought that to Wolfe. Mr. Leach, he murmured, the connoisseur with a thirst for secrets. So Leach used La Castagna to move product. The restaurant folded, and then Giada shows up at Bellini's. Correct. And now someone's using the ravioli. No, Wolfe said, holding up a finger. Not the ravioli. The illusion of the ravioli. The dish is merely a pretext. What is delivered is not flavor, it is information. And the note today? A warning from someone who's realized the play is out of their hands. He stood slowly, which meant the next move was coming. Summon Mr. Bellini, he said. Tomorrow at 10. What for? To confirm what he suspects, and to introduce him to the next performance, one in which he is no longer center stage, but merely a witness. I made the call. Bellini confirmed. And Wolfe returned to his chair, silent, thoughtful, a man building his trap with threads no one else could see yet. Outside, the sun dipped behind clouds. Inside, the game narrowed to one truth. Whoever was stuffing secrets into the ravioli had just been invited to dinner. Bellini arrived at the brownstone at exactly 9:59 the following morning, which was a minute too prompt for Wolfe's tastes, but a shade too nervous for mine. He was wearing a dark suit that looked more expensive than yesterday's and smelled faintly of bay leaf and pressure. I met him at the door, ushered him in without pleasantries, and guided him to the office where Wolfe sat at his desk, framed by the glow of the west window like a reluctant pope summoned to pass judgment on a kitchen crime. Wolfe didn't look up from the sheet of paper he held until Bellini was seated. Even then, he took a beat longer than politeness required. Mr. Bellini, Wolfe said, setting the paper down. You are here because the threads of this unpleasant matter now tangle too tightly for you to cut alone. If you have been holding back, now is the time to loosen your grip. Bellini offered a brittle smile. I've told you everything I know. No, you have told me everything you are comfortable acknowledging. The distinction matters. I took my spot in the red chair beside Bellini and crossed my legs. You left something out, or someone? Bellini's lips parted, then closed. Wolfe pressed the advantage. Giada Marini, he said evenly. Her previous employer, La Castagna, was the subject of a federal probe. That probe intersected, however quietly, with one of your own clients, Gareth Leach. Bellini looked cornered, but not surprised. I didn't know about the investigation. But you knew about the connection. Bellini nodded slowly. Yes. Then why hire her? She was competent, efficient, she came recommended, and she never asked questions. Wolfe frowned. A woman who asks no questions, yet stands still while secrets move around her. That's not efficiency, Mr. Bellini. That's design. She wasn't involved. Of course she was, Wolfe said, voice rising only half a degree. Whether knowingly or not. Miss Marini was placed in your establishment with the full knowledge of its value, its access, its clientele, its plausible intimacy. She was the hinge, as I told Archie. The one who neither enters nor exits, but through whom all movement passes. Bellini blinked. Then who sent her? Wolfe leaned back. That is precisely the question we shall answer. But first, you must stop thinking of yourself as the host of a dinner party gone awry. You're not merely being used, you're being observed, watched, perhaps groomed for a fall. Bellini's knuckles whitened. You think this is about me? I think you are the vessel, Mr. Bellini. You have created a space, a high-end culinary environment that allows secrets to pass unnoticed. You provide context, credibility, cover, and someone has noticed. Bellini stared at the rug like it might whisper reassurance if he looked hard enough. What do you want me to do? Wolfe gestured toward me. You will do precisely what Mr. Goodwin instructs. We are going to stage a provocation, a gentle one, nothing theatrical. But it will be enough. I cleared my throat. Here's the play. You announce discreetly. that a second bottle from the same Piedmontese vintage, the one with the message in the cork, has surfaced. You'll say it arrived late, delivered by mistake. But it's intact. You haven't opened it. Bellini frowned. But there isn't a second bottle. Of course not, I said. But someone will want it to exist, and someone else will panic if it does. Wolfe added, this fabrication will serve two purposes. First, it suggests you are still a player in whatever game is being played. Second, it offers bait, not to catch, but to expose. I suppose you want me to spread this rumor myself? No, Wolfe said. Let it slip to Giada. Bellini's eyes narrowed. You think she'll take the bait? If she's still in contact with the interested party, she will. If not, the absence of reaction is revealing in itself. He nodded slowly. And after that? You return here, Wolfe said, and report anything that seems changed. Staff behavior. Clients calling, old friends appearing suddenly hungry. Bellini exhaled through his nose and stood. All right, I'll do it. You must be subtle, Wolfe warned. No alarms, no dramatics. I know how to season a story, Bellini said, and for the first time there was a hint of iron under the silk. He left the room with a bit more spine than he'd arrived with. When he was gone, Wolfe turned to me. You'll follow him? I didn't need to ask why. Discreetly. Of course. Watch the restaurant. Watch her. And if anyone else shows interest in the bottle, I want to know what they smell like before they even get close to it. So that's how I found myself across the street from Bellini's at 4:30 p.m., dressed as a man waiting for a dinner reservation he had no intention of keeping. I had a copy of the Times tucked under one arm and a cup of coffee growing cold in the other. Through the front window, I saw Bellini in quiet conversation with Giada near the bar. Her posture was unchanged, hands clasped, spine straight, but her head tilted just a fraction too much to the left when he spoke. I didn't need a telescope to read body language. She wasn't surprised. She was calculating. After Bellini walked away, she stood still for 3 full seconds, then turned and walked to the service phone. A call. 15 seconds. Then she returned to the floor. That was it. By 6:15, she had made 2 more brief calls, one from her cell near the coat closet and one from the alley out back where she lit a cigarette but didn't smoke it. I'd seen nerves dressed up as calm before. This wasn't panic. It was protocol. I called Wolfe from a payphone a block away. She took the bait, I said. Made 3 calls, 2 quick ones, 1 longer, and then settled into her routine like nothing had happened. Did you see any unfamiliar faces arrive? Not yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone showed up before dessert. Remain another hour. Observe the patrons. Note anyone who speaks with Giada directly. I'll keep count. At 7:05, he showed up. Mid-40s, trim beard, grey suit, no tie. He carried himself like a man who didn't want to be watched but always assumed he was. He didn't ask for a table. He walked directly to Giada and handed her a small white envelope. They spoke for less than a minute. Then he turned and left. I made my move. I caught up with him half a block down, just in time to accidentally bump into him near a curb cut. My apology was fast, clumsy, and full of practiced charm. While I brushed his lapel, I slipped the envelope out of his coat. He didn't notice. When I reached the brownstone an hour later, Wolfe was in his office. I placed the envelope on his desk. From our silent guest, I said. Wolfe opened it with the corner of a paper knife. Inside was a single item, a photograph. Grainy, color faded, so it showed 3 people in an old-world kitchen. 2 men, 1 woman, and in the background, a wine rack bearing a familiar sigil. Bellini's crest, but older, hand-carved. I looked closer. The woman was younger, but I recognized her. Lena. Wolfe nodded once. Now, Mr. Goodwin, we know who cooked this stew. He didn't elaborate, but I knew. Whoever was pulling the strings had known Lena long time and knew what was hidden in the cellar long before the first cork was popped. Wolfe didn't move for a long time after studying the photograph. It remained on the desk like an accusation neither of us had voiced yet. His eyes were fixed not on Lena, but on the man to her left, a tall figure with a narrow build and a faint curl to his lip, as if the camera had interrupted something smug. "You know him?" I asked. "No," Wolfe replied. "But someone does." I waited. He didn't blink. He finally spoke, voice low and tight. "It is not the image itself. It is its survival. That it exists still and was passed to Giada tonight means it was preserved for this purpose, as proof, as leverage, or as a message." I nodded. "It tells us someone wanted Lena to be found, but on their terms. The fact that it's not labeled, not signed, no threat, no demand. It's pure suggestion, which means it's bait. Or insurance," Wolfe muttered. "Possession of this photograph implies knowledge of what preceded the current entanglement. That implies motive. And if Miss Morante is the constant thread, we must now understand her origin more precisely. Want me to push harder on the Poughkeepsie lead? Number lets all continue. If we pressure her now, she will vanish again, and this time we may not find her. Instead," he paused, his fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm against the armrest. "You will revisit Giada, no direct accusations, but press her for personal history, lightly, be sympathetic." I raised an eyebrow. That's not a shade in my usual palette. "It is today," Wolfe said sharply. "We are not pursuing guilt. We are pursuing willingness. If she is wavering, if this photograph was intended as a reminder rather than a threat, we must learn how far she can be moved before she breaks. And if she's already broken? Then someone else is directing the flow, but we must try." He gestured toward the photograph. "Take that with you. Do not show it unless you're sure." It was just after noon when I arrived back at Bellini's, which had the muted buzz of a place recovering from a late night. The dining room was empty except for one waiter resetting the polished flatware, humming something that sounded like Vivaldi by way of a hangover. I asked for Giada and was told she was in the office doing inventory. I found her seated at the desk with a clipboard, a calculator, and a faint scowl that had nothing to do with numbers. Her head lifted as I stepped in. "You again," she said, not unkindly. I closed the door behind me. "You're observant. That's good. I need someone who notices things." "Depends what things," she said, setting the clipboard down. "I want to talk to you about Lena." She tensed, but not defensively, like a boxer tightening a glove. "She's not answering calls," I continued. "But someone sent us something. A photo, her eyes. Didn't move, but her shoulders told me what I needed." She knew exactly which one. "She didn't want it to be found," Giada said, quiet now. "But someone kept it." She nodded. "There were copies. The man in the photo, his name was Stefan. I don't know his last name. He worked with her in Naples, not just in kitchens. They had another arrangement." "Illegal?" Giada didn't answer. "Romantic?" She shook her head. "Number more like survival. He protected her. In exchange, she moved things for him. Information. And wine. Rare bottles. But not for collectors. They were coded. Labels resealed. Documents written on label backs. One bottle went to Brussels with half a ledger inside. One came to New York. Bellini's bottle. Her silence confirmed it. "She tried to stop," she said after a long pause. "She thought she could work clean, but then she saw Stefan again. Here, table 9. And now she's gone. She ran. Not because she was afraid of Stefan. Because she was afraid she'd do something for him again." I studied her face, her eyes fixed on the corner of the desk. "She gave you the photograph," I said. Another long silence. Then, Yes. Why? Because I needed to know. She left it for me, hidden in the back of the wine cabinet. I found it 2 nights ago, and when Bellini mentioned the second bottle, I thought maybe someone needed to see it. So you passed it on? She nodded. To Stefan? Number to someone else. A courier. They'd know where to bring it. And you don't know what it means? She finally looked at me. I know exactly what it means. It means this isn't about Lena anymore. It's about what's still moving through this place. Messages. Secrets. Proofs. And Stefan. He's not the only one. He's just the most dangerous. I leaned forward slightly. You want this to end, don't you? Her voice cracked on the edge. Yes. I pulled the photograph out of my coat and laid it gently on the desk. Her hands didn't move toward it. She looked at it like it was something radioactive, a moment from another life that had followed her home. If you know where Stefan is, I said carefully, now's the time. I don't, but I know someone who might. Who? A woman named Mireille. She used to be his fixer in Marseille. She's here now, staying at the Marmont Hotel, under a different name, but I can find it. Can you get her to talk? Giada's lips pulled into a crooked smile. Only if she thinks I'm still part of it. Are you? Number, but I remember how to fake it. I stood. Then fake it well, and don't vanish. If you do, we can't protect you. I'm not Lena, she said. If I go under, it'll be with my eyes open. Back at the brownstone, I laid out the conversation in full. Wolfe absorbed it in silence. When I was done, he exhaled slowly and pressed his fingers together. So Lena fled not from guilt, but from temptation, he murmured. And Giada, by choosing to pass the photograph, has stepped out of the current. She wants out. Good, we shall use that. What about Mireille? Wolfe's eyes closed briefly. A fixer from Marseille would not be here unless something was already in motion. We must be ready. Want Saul to move? Number, not yet. Let Miss Marini contact Mireille. If Mireille bites, we will have confirmed the scope, and then we tighten the circle. Carefully. As always. That night, Fritz served a brothy stew with leeks and shaved truffle, and Wolfe ate in rare silence. When I cleared the dishes, I found him in the office again, staring at the photograph now pinned to the blotter under a glass weight. Stefan, he said quietly, not lifting his eyes. A man who moves secrets like wine, who hides information in flavor and bottle, and a woman who carries the taste of him even after she runs. I waited. They think this is a game of corks and shadows, Archie. But they forget something. What's that? In a restaurant, everyone leaves fingerprints on glass, on silver, on napkins. But only a fool thinks you can season a lie and expect it to stay down. I nodded. So what's next? Wolfe looked up, calm as ever. Tomorrow we set the table. The following morning began under low, bruised skies, New York's idea of ambiance when it knew something was about to go wrong. Fritz made eggs with a sprinkle of chive and silence, and Wolfe ate with the calm of a man already constructing the next 5 moves in a game only he understood. I knew better than to fill the air with speculation. When Wolfe's mind was running, it didn't need noise. It needed fuel. At 10:14, the phone rang. I got it on the second ring. Goodwin, I said. It's Giada, came the voice, tight but composed. Mireille agreed to meet. Tonight, 1 drink, no questions. She picked the place. Hotel Marmont Lounge, 8 o'clock. Will she know who she's really meeting? She'll know I'm curious, that's all. Does she know your curiosity might be contagious? Giada didn't respond, but her silence carried a weight that felt like understanding. I'll be nearby, I said. Don't go in alone. I have to. If she smells surveillance, she'll disappear, and she never reappears. Understood. Sit with your back to a mirror. Stay in view, and if she hands you anything, don't keep it. Pass it to me. got it." She hung up without pleasantries. She was committed now. One way or another, she was going to make contact. I relayed everything to Wolfe, who was already mapping contingencies across the topography of his desk blotter. "She won't come empty-handed," Wolfe said. "Mireille will want something. Money, number leverage, knowledge, or insurance. She's a broker, not a buyer. Then what's she selling?" Wolfe stared at the orchid resting near the edge of his desk. A way out. For whom, we must discover. At 7:20 that evening, I stationed myself in the lounge's far corner, half shielded by a glossy floor plant that could have hidden a magician's assistant. The Marmont was dim, expensive, and precisely the kind of place people met to lie with linen napkins in their laps. Giada entered at 7:57 in a fitted navy dress and a confidence that wasn't entirely hers. She took the table closest to the back wall mirror, ordered something clear and cold, and waited. Mireille arrived at 8:03. She was small and thin, dressed in shades of muted slate and silver, with the sort of face you'd forget until she wanted you to remember it. Her heels made no sound. Her eyes made no promises. She sat opposite Giada and ordered nothing. They didn't touch. They barely moved. The first 5 minutes passed like a cold wind. Then Mireille produced a cigarette case and opened it with deliberate ease. I couldn't see what was inside, but when she slid it across the table to Giada, I caught the smallest tremor in Giada's hand. She didn't open it. They spoke in low tones. Giada listened more than she spoke. Mireille, even at this distance, looked unbothered, like a woman who expected very little from people and got even less from the world. At 8:26, she stood. No handshake, no farewell, just a slow turn and a silent exit. Giada stayed seated. She waited 3 full minutes. Then she picked up the cigarette case, stood, and exited through the side entrance where I met her. "Don't say anything," she whispered. "Just walk." We moved up the block like two people returning from a quiet dinner and made it back to the car before I spoke. "What's in it?" "Something better than tobacco." She handed me the case. Inside were 4 items: a key card, a torn photograph of a shipping manifest, a printed receipt from a wine distributor in Geneva, and a napkin with a phone number scribbled on it in green ink. "She said the real drop is happening tomorrow," Giada said. "At Bellini's. 11:30, table 6. One man, alone. The bottle arrives separately. It's not about the wine, it's what's under the label." "Message?" "Number signature." She said it completes a ledger. Wolfe's words from the night before echoed in my head. They think this is a game of corks and shadows. I drove straight back to the brownstone, bypassing a deli stop that had been on my mind all day. When I placed the cigarette case on Wolfe's desk, he examined its contents like they were relics from an archaeological dig. "This," he said, holding up the wine distributor's receipt, "is the name of the courier company we need." I pointed to the napkin. "Phone number." Wolfe didn't answer. He was already dialing. He let it ring 5 times, then hung up. "Disconnected." I leaned against the bookshelf. "So the drop's tomorrow. Someone shows up, collects a bottle that isn't really about wine, and disappears." Wolfe nodded. "And now, we interrupt." He summoned me closer and laid out the plan with the quiet confidence of a man setting a trap under the guise of table service. We would let the drop proceed, but not the way they intended. Fritz would prepare an identical bottle, down to the label, the wax seal, and the vintage. Saul would ensure the courier intercepted it at the appropriate moment. The real bottle, the one carrying the signature, would come to us. "Won't they notice?" I asked. "Not immediately," Wolfe said. "By the time they do, the play will be over." He didn't say who would take the final bow. The next morning, Saul arrived at 10:15 with the look of a man who hadn't been caught and didn't plan to be. He took the package, confirmed the instructions, and disappeared into the machinery of the city. At 11:20, I called Bellini from a phone booth across the street from the restaurant. "Everything in place?" "Yes," Bellini replied. "Table 6 is ready. One place setting. Special attention." "And Giada?" "She's in the back. Nervous." "Good. Do I need to do anything?" "Number, just pour the wine. Let the cork do the rest." I stayed on the line long enough to hear the shift in Bellini's breathing, the kind that comes when a man realizes the part he's playing in someone else's story. At 11:38 the man arrived. Dark suit, square shoulders, clean shave. He sat, ordered nothing. Bellini himself brought the bottle, a mirror image of the one we'd intercepted. The man took it, nodded, and left 10 minutes later without taking a sip. Saul, I knew, would be trailing him until the signature was confirmed. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe took the real bottle in hand. He didn't open it. He studied it. The label was ordinary, the cork flawless, but under the wax, nestled against the glass, was a second layer, a thin strip of vellum embedded against the curve. Fritz steamed the wax free. The strip unfolded like a secret spoken slowly, a name, a list of financial codes, and the signature. "Gareth Leach," Wolfe said. "Transferring funds through labels, wine laundering, the vintage is just the veil." And Lena, she saw this, or knew it, and refused to carry it again. That made her a liability. But not to Mireille. "No," Wolfe said. "To Stefan. Mireille has changed sides, possibly always had her own." "Then what happens now?" Wolfe looked up. "Now," he said, "we set the chairs." And with that, we began preparations for the final course. It was 4:15 p.m. when Wolfe gave the word. The office was quiet but alert, as if even the furniture understood the plan had reached the part where mistakes start costing things. Fritz had cleared lunch 2 hours ago, but a faint trace of saffron still hung in the air. One of those fragrant ghosts Wolfe barely tolerated when he needed focus. The bottle, sat sealed on the center of Wolfe's desk, flanked by 2 copies of the signature strip that Saul had already photographed and sent to 3 relevant agencies through back channels Wolfe never discussed. We had the wine, the code, the list, and now it was time to play the piece Wolfe had been composing since the ravioli landed in our kitchen. "They must all come here," Wolfe said. "Not only the principal actors, the instruments as well." "The bottle was the crescendo," I offered. "No," Wolfe said. "It was the overture." He instructed me to begin the calls. Bellini was first. I told him Wolfe required his presence. Tonight, 6:30. No arguments. Then Giada. Same time. No excuses. Then Mireille. That one took finesse. She didn't answer her phone, and when I knocked at her Marmont suite's door, a pale man in a checked jacket with an accent from somewhere south of Geneva opened it and told me she'd left instructions. "If it is the detective, say she will arrive." But not before dusk. Wolfe frowned when I told him. "Dusk," he muttered. "How theatrical." Pfui. Finally, Saul returned with confirmation. The courier had taken the swapped bottle directly to an address leased under a shell company in Flushing. Inside was a staging room, computers, files, maps, a small safe filled with labels, cork stamps, and inventory lists dating back 6 years, all matching Leach's wine purchases. It was enough to open a formal investigation. And yet, Wolfe didn't call Kramer. "Not yet," he said. "Not until the play is complete." At 6:22, Bellini arrived, looking more worn than stylish this time. The gray had crept forward at his temples, and the tie he wore was a shade too tight at the throat. He sat on the red chair without waiting to be invited. "I've lost control of my restaurant," he said flatly. "You never had control," Wolfe replied. What you had was ambience. Someone else controlled the air. Giada came next, dressed like she was entering a confessional. Her eyes darted once around the room, then dropped to the carpet. I nodded her toward the yellow chair. She didn't speak. Mireille arrived at 6:48 precisely, wrapped in a shawl the color of dusk, which I figured was the kind of thing she planned deliberately. She didn't sit until Wolfe gestured. No one said a word. Wolfe began with a quiet exhale. "We are here to make something plain," he said. "Not for law enforcement, not for justice, but for clarity, the only weapon I have ever used." Bellini stirred. "You, Mr. Bellini, created a sanctuary, an elegant, respectable cloak under which much could pass unnoticed. Wine bottles with embedded codes, courier contacts disguised as reservation requests. The man you knew as a collector was instead a trafficker. The dish he asked for wasn't the porcini. It was the protection you offered by being unaware. I didn't know. Number, but you permitted convenience. And that has a cost." He turned slightly. "Miss Marini, you were placed at Bellini's after your previous post dissolved under scrutiny. Your connection to Leach and the La Castagna probe is not conclusive, but it is enough. You were the hinge. Your loyalties were fluid." Giada didn't speak. "Until Lena's photograph," Wolfe said. "You passed it to Mireille, knowing it would draw a reaction. You chose us, not because you trusted us, but because you understood what the others would do if left unchecked." Still no word from her. Wolfe turned again. "And you, Madame Mireille, you are the bridge. Stéphane's broker once. Possibly still, or possibly not." Mireille gave a faint smile. "You speak well for a man who never leaves his house. I do not need to move to see." He reached for the bottle, and set it before him. "This is what you were waiting for. It was not about Lena, not about Bellini, not even about the ledger. It was about this final act. The delivery, the receipt, the proof of continuity." Mireille's expression didn't change. "You knew," Wolfe said quietly, "that if it happened one more time, the whole architecture could fall. Too many people had seen too much. So you arranged this final delivery. Not to complete the chain, but to end it." The room was silent. "You burned the napkin on purpose," Wolfe said. Mireille blinked once. Lena ran because Stéphane offered her another task. She refused. She vanished. But not before ensuring that someone else, Giada, could pass on the truth. And you, Mireille, you provided just enough to keep us circling. You wanted Stéphane to be caught, but not publicly. Finally, Mireille spoke. "I do not trade in headlines, only silence." "That," Wolfe said, "is the most dangerous currency of all." He reached into a drawer and produced a folder. Inside were copies of every document Saul had retrieved from the Flushing staging house, plus the photograph, the label map, the Geneva receipt. He passed it to Giada. "You will take this to the Treasury Department. Not the police, not the press." Giada nodded, holding the folder like a lit candle. Bellini looked up, finally. "What happens to my restaurant?" Wolfe was cold. "You may cleanse it. You may close it. But you cannot undo what has passed through it. If you are wise, you will change the name. Permanently." Bellini swallowed, stood slowly, and left without another word. Mireille remained seated. "And Stéphane?" Wolfe looked to me. "Mr. Goodwin?" "Saul's on him," I said. "Right now. We knew he'd show at the wine house. Had to confirm the switch for himself. He's not going anywhere." Mireille smiled faintly. "Then the table is cleared." "No," Wolfe said, voice low. "Only set. The feast has not yet begun." She stood, adjusted the shawl, and exited with a grace that made me suspect she'd never be entirely gone. Giada left last, silent, folder pressed to her chest, eyes unblinking. When the door closed, Wolfe reached for the bottle. The real one. He stared at it for a moment, then passed it to Fritz, who had appeared silently, summoned by something quieter than a bell. "Dispose of it properly," Wolfe said. "I'm done with it." Fritz nodded and vanished. I remained. "What now?" I asked. Wolfe shifted in his chair and exhaled, as if deflating the last of the tension that had carried him through. "Now, Archie," he said, "we have dinner. And tomorrow, we return to our proper arrangement, where things arrive in bowls, not envelopes. And if someone sends us another ravioli—" Wolfe lifted a brow. "Then may God help them, because I will not." The next morning was grey and still, the kind of morning New York occasionally allows itself to remember how quiet it used to be. Wolfe stayed upstairs longer than usual, and I didn't bother calling him down. He'd earned his hours with the orchids. Me, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, ran the city papers for anything tying to Leach, Stefan, or Bellini, and found only silence, a welcome absence. It meant Wolfe had done what he always did, resolved the thing so thoroughly that it made no noise on its way out. By 10:30, Saul checked in. Stefan had been intercepted trying to retrieve a second package from a Brooklyn basement used as a shadow cellar. The drop never occurred. Our substitution had cut off the final movement of the symphony, and once Stefan saw the bottle was wrong, he tried to disappear. Saul and a quiet team had made sure he didn't. No guns, no cuffs, just a very persuasive conversation involving ledgers, agency names, and the threat of diplomatic pressure. Stefan had folded with all the elegance of a linen napkin. Wolfe came down at 11, wearing a mustard-yellow dressing gown, in the air of a man who'd resumed his rightful place atop a world that had briefly dared to become untidy. I reported Saul's update. Wolfe said only, "Good," and resumed his chair. "Do we expect retaliation?" I asked. "Retaliation implies a sense of injustice," Wolfe replied, "and none of the parties involved are burdened with such sentiment. Leach will disappear behind lawyers. Mireille will shift cities. Stefan will cooperate because his survival requires it. The rest is detritus. And Lena?" Wolfe folded his hands. "Still in Poughkeepsie?" I nodded. "Last sighting was yesterday afternoon. Still in the motel. Still paying cash. But she checked the security bolt twice and asked the front desk if there was a side exit. She knows." "Good. Let her remain unknown a while longer." "You think she'll come back?" "She won't have to. The work is done." There was a silence after that. Not the awkward kind, but the rare kind that says everything still standing is, for once, in its right place. Fritz brought in Wolfe's midday beer. Went to my desk and started a new crossword. 11 across asked for a word meaning final reckoning. 5 letters. I didn't need to think twice. At 1 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting it. Wolfe certainly wasn't. When I opened the door, I got another surprise. Giada. No folder, no apron. Just street clothes and a paper envelope in her hand. "Just me," she said. "I didn't expect anyone. That's why I came." I let her in, led her to the office. Wolfe looked up but didn't speak. "I came to say thank you," she said, addressing him directly, "and to ask something." Wolfe gave her a single nod. "Speak. I'm leaving the city. I need a name to put on a resume. Someone who will say I was useful, that I did the right thing in the end." "You did not do the right thing?" Wolfe said, not cruelly, but without softening the truth. "You did the necessary thing. They are rarely the same." Giada didn't flinch. "Will you give me the name anyway?" "No," he said, "but I will give you something else." He took a blank sheet of his monogrammed stationery and wrote a single sentence in his deliberate, heavy script. She knew when to stop lying. Most never do. He signed it with his full name, folded it, and handed it to her. She read it, lips pressed together, then slipped it into the envelope and held it to her chest. "I'll keep that," she said. He nodded. She left. I stood by the window and watched her cross the street, disappear into the crowd like a note folded into a pocket. The rest of the day passed without interruption. No more letters. No more ravioli. At 6, Fritz served veal medallions in a Madeira reduction with a side of asparagus I suspect had been arranged by compass. Wolfe ate with quiet satisfaction. I offered a comment about the sauce. He offered no reply. Later, back in the office, Wolfe sipped his coffee and spoke for the first time in nearly an hour. Archie. Yeah? Do you know why they failed? Stefan. Leach. Mireille. He shook his head slowly. All of them. Enlighten me. Because they mistook elegance for protection. They thought that secrets cloaked in refinement were safer, that wine and linen and candlelight could soften betrayal. That deception, if tasteful, might escape consequence. He leaned back, his voice calm, almost reflective. But rot smells the same, no matter the label. He closed his eyes. I took that as my cue to call it a day, and as I reached for my coat I found myself thinking, not about the codes or the bottle or the signature, but about Lena, somewhere north, still waiting for the world to forget her, and about Giada, walking into a new name, and about Wolfe, who hadn't left the house in years but managed, yet again, to rearrange the world from his chair. There were no headlines, no arrests, no justice in the courtroom sense. But the secret had been pulled from the ravioli and placed on the table. And Wolfe, as always, had been the one to name it. The next morning broke with a faint drizzle and a whisper of wind curling under the eaves, just enough to rattle the old windows in Wolfe's orchid rooms, where I assumed he was doing his usual act of nurturing things more delicate and less treacherous than people. I'd brewed coffee, skimmed the papers, and was halfway through a cinnamon roll Fritz had smuggled from some hidden bakery uptown when the doorbell rang. It wasn't Bellini, and it wasn't Giada. I knew that much by the sound of it. 2 sharp buzzes with no hesitation in between. People who hesitate at Wolfe's door tend to be unsure of what they're walking into. This one rang like they already considered themselves part of the act. I opened the door and found a man in his late 50s, stocky in the way that suggested he had once been lean but traded it in for authority. His raincoat dripped onto the tiles. He held a folded umbrella in one hand and something square and wrapped in brown paper under the other. "Mr. Goodwin?" he asked. "That's me." He extended the package. "Courier. Hand delivery. Signature required." I took the thing, signed the slip with the name I save for moments like this, Archibald McNair Goodwin, Esquire, and shut the door before the man could ask if I wanted to know who sent it. I didn't need to ask. The package was addressed in the same stilted machine type as the first note, the one about Martin and the wine. Only this time, it was a box, not a letter. I carried it into the office and set it on Wolfe's desk. "Something has arrived," I called, just loud enough for the upper floors. 6 minutes later, Wolfe entered, freshly shaven, in a deep plum dressing gown that could have passed for ceremonial garb if you squinted. He looked at the box, then at me. "Origin?" "Courier. No sender listed. Same font as before. I didn't open it." He nodded and sat, inspecting the package with slow, deliberate hands. He peeled the paper away carefully, no tearing, and revealed a thin wooden box, the kind used for cigars, lined with velvet. Inside, resting like a crown jewel, was a photograph. Another one. But this one wasn't old. It had been taken no more than a few days ago, maybe hours. It showed the interior of a wine cellar, neatly arranged racks, clean lighting, and in the corner, half lit, half shadowed, stood a figure I recognized instantly. Lena. She was looking directly at the lens. Not scared, not smug, just steady. Wolfe studied it in silence, his thumb tracing the edge of the image without touching it. "There's a message," I said. "Of course there is," he replied. Is it a warning? No. He looked up at me, eyes steady. It's an invitation. I waited. She has returned. Where? Somewhere that matters. Not to us, necessarily, but to the ones still watching. This cellar is no ordinary place. It is staged. This photograph was taken to be seen. And delivered to us. To me, Wolfe corrected, to ensure I would know she is no longer in hiding. Then what does she want? To be left alone. But not forgotten. It is a statement. I leaned forward, arms on my knees. You think she's re-entered the game? Number I think she's made peace with the rules. She will not run again. Nor will she speak. But her silence now is voluntary. That makes her dangerous to anyone who once depended on her fear. You think Mireille sent this? Possibly. But it feels final, like a stone placed on a grave. The photograph remained on the desk, and I stared at it longer than I meant to. Lena looked like someone who had found the bottom of a very deep well and decided to build something in it. I said, "So what now?" "Nothing," Wolfe said. "Nothing at all. The wine has been uncorked. The sediment has settled. All that remains is to let the vintage breathe." "And you're sure it's over?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached to the side drawer, pulled out a slip of notepaper, and began to write. 3 sentences. Tight, heavy strokes. When he finished, he folded it, sealed it in an envelope, and passed it to me. "If anyone comes," he said, "give them this. Only if they mention Lena by name. And if they don't, then they are here for the wrong reason." That was Wolfe's way of drawing a line. Not a threat, but a declaration. Whatever moved beyond this point belonged to someone else's domain. At 3:45 that afternoon, Saul called. "Your girl's in the wind," he said. Checked out of the motel. Left no card, no bags. Just a single sheet of paper in the trash can. What did it say? Half a phone number, torn, European country code. That's it. She wants to be followed, but not found. Exactly. I passed the message to Wolfe. She's creating a trail, he said. A false one. And if Stefan's people pick it up, then she's led them away from the real location. I sat down. She's still playing. Wolfe didn't smile, but his eyes glinted faintly. She always was. She just needed permission. That night, dinner was simple. Duck breast, roasted with thyme and blood orange, served with pomezana that Fritz sliced with such symmetry I almost asked if he was trying to send a message. Wolfe ate more slowly than usual, not from fatigue, but from something that resembled contemplation. When we returned to the office afterward, he didn't go for his books. He stared instead at the photograph of Lena, still resting under glass on the blotter. She made her own exit, I said. She did. No headlines, no tragedy, just gone. Just quiet. I nodded. Maybe that's the best anyone gets. Wolfe didn't respond. The next morning, the photograph was gone from the desk. I didn't ask where he put it, and I didn't need to. The office was quieter than usual that afternoon. Wolfe sat behind his desk, the light from the western window softening the angles of his face into something almost serene, like a cathedral window filtering dusk. I took my usual post near the door, watching, waiting, because in a Wolfe case, the finale never rushes. It arrives on its own clock, deliberate and inevitable. Bellini was the first to arrive, late afternoon shadows dragging his coat behind him like a weight he wished he could shake off. He stood just inside the door, hesitated, then finally settled into the chair I indicated. His eyes betrayed the exhaustion of a man who'd lost more than a recipe. "Mr. Bellini," Wolfe began without preamble, "your establishment was a vessel, a stage set for secrets far beyond any kitchen's usual fare. You allowed elegance to veil the murky dealings beneath. Tell me, were you complicit or merely a custodian of convenience? Bellini swallowed hard. I didn't know. I swear it. No one knew, and yet everyone bore responsibility. Your silence was the sauce that seasoned the deceit. Giada entered then, quiet but resolute. Her eyes met Wolfe's steadily. You played the hinge, Wolfe said, carrying burdens too heavy for one person. You passed a message, tipping the scales. You have paid a price in fear and exile. Giada nodded. I only wanted to survive. Survival is not always innocence. Mireille appeared last, confident and cool as ever, her presence like a blade wrapped in velvet. You brokered shadows and whispers, Wolfe said, balancing threats and loyalties with cold calculation. But the game ended when you underestimated the watchfulness of this house. She gave a small, dry smile. I knew the risks. Yet you chose to send the photograph. An invitation and a warning. Why? To bring closure. To sever ties. To protect those who still mattered. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Stefan believed himself untouchable. Yet he fell not to force, but to patience and precision. Justice, in this case, is not a verdict, but an unveiling. I watched Bellini close his eyes, the weight of years lifting as the truth settled around him. And Lena? I asked softly. She chose silence and shadow over exposure. Her last act was the photograph, a beacon for those seeking truth without spectacle. Wolfe stood. The final note struck. This case was never about ravioli, nor wine, nor whispered codes. It was about trust betrayed and reclaimed, about the cost of secrets carried in plain sight. He looked at me, a rare softness in his gaze. Archie, justice is served cold here, but it is justice nonetheless. I nodded, feeling the closure in the air. As Bellini, Giada, and Mireille took their leave, the brownstone returned to its sacred quiet. Fritz appeared with a fresh pot of coffee and a plate of Wolfe's favorite blue cheese biscuits. Wolfe sank into his chair and, after a moment, looked up. Archie, he said, the world is full of ingredients better left uncombined. But when they mix, it falls to us to separate the flavors. I grinned. And if the ravioli shows up again, then I will sharpen my fork and patience alike. I laughed and poured the coffee, knowing Wolfe had once again turned chaos into order, not with violence, but with the quiet strength of intellect. The case was closed, the mystery resolved, and the brownstone once more, a sanctuary untouched by the secrets it had exposed.